Good evening, everyone. I would now like to call the regular meeting of the board for September the 30th, 2021 to order. Great to see all the orange. Item number 2 on the agenda. This evening, item 2 on the agenda is amended for the acknowledgement of this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I will read an acknowledgement, and following that, in place of the anthem, we will observe a moment of silence for reflection. Please rise for our acknowledgement and moment of silence, and please turn off your cameras while this occurs. I would like to acknowledge that the Peel District School Board's H.J.A. Brown Education Center is located on Treaty 13A of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are grateful to the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation as the caretakers of this land and recognize the benefits we receive from this land. We also acknowledge and give thanks to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have walked before us. This land continues to be home for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, many who are students in Peel schools. We are all treaty people. Treaties are promises to protect and share the land. As we all mutually benefit from this land, we must remember that we borrow this land from future generations. How can we uphold this promise to protect and share this land? Take a moment and think about what you can do today and moving forward. The Peel Board is committed to amplifying the voices of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students, their families, and their communities. We will continue to learn the true history of this place, and we will celebrate the vast contributions First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have made and continue to make to the story of Canada. We will now observe a moment of silent reflection in recognition of this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Thank you for sharing that moment together. Moving on to item number 3 in the agenda. I don't have access to my, can you hear me? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just didn't have access to my camera. Alrighty. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. The following changes have been made to the agenda. Item 2 was amended. Item 5.1 will also recognize Hispanic heritage. There's an addendum to the retirement list of item 6.1. And there's an addition of 13.5 Committee of the Whole open session minutes. With those amendments, I now approve the agenda for this evening. Item 4, I have no conflicts to declare this evening. Item 5.1, Islamic Heritage Month for October. The recognition of Canadian Islamic Heritage Month in October was declared by the Canadian government in 2007. The Islamic Heritage Month Act of 2016, passed by the province of Ontario, signifies, acknowledges, and affirms the contributions Muslims make to all aspects of Ontario life and in many fields, including mathematics, science, athletics, literature, and the arts. Muslim communities in large urban centers such as Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver have flourished since the long-time arrival of the first Muslims as enslaved Africans through the transatlantic slave trade and European Muslims who made Canada their homeland in the 1850s. Nevertheless, the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate is a reality reinforced with the attack of 5 family members of the Muslim faith by a driver of a pickup truck in London, Ontario, last June 2021. At the Peel District School Board, we are committed to improving the well-being and achievement of all students, which means confronting Islamophobia and dismantling the systemic mechanisms that enable anti-Muslim hate. Our publicly stated commitments to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and pandemic health and safety protocols ensure that this occurs through engaging equitable and inclusive online and in-person learning modalities and through culturally relevant program opportunities. Hispanic Heritage. May 2015, the Canadian government proclaimed October as Hispanic Heritage Month, also referred to as Latin American Heritage Month. During the 10th month of the calendar year, members of the Hispanic communities gather to honor their shared culture. As of 2018, throughout Canada, in each and every year, the month of October is to be known as Latin American Heritage Month. Hispanic Heritage Month recognizes the rich contributions of Hispanic Canadians to our social, economic, political, and multicultural fabric. It is an opportunity to remember, celebrate, and educate future generations about the outstanding achievements and contributions of Hispanic people in the province. The Peel District School Board commitments to improving the well-being and achievement of all students includes confronting anti-Latino rhetoric and dismantling the systemic mechanisms that enable hate directed to those of Hispanic origin and align with our publicly stated commitments of anti-racism and anti-oppression. Agenda items 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5 collectively. The old adage that it takes a village to raise a child is so true. The Peel Board appreciates all the important work of educators and support staff and the contributions that they make in the lives of children, families, and community members each and every day. These recognition days are an opportunity to give these individuals the recognition they deserve. Be sure to thank them for their contributions and let them know that they're truly appreciated. Thank you to each of you. We appreciate all that you do. Item 6.1, retirements. Please join me in congratulating the following individuals on their retirement. We thank them for their many years of dedicated service to the Peel District School Board, and we wish them every success in their future endeavors. The following are the retirees: Lori Allison, Michael Bartolos, Karen Burns, Cecil Chappelle, Leslie Shehutek, Cassetta Clark, Liza Dixon, Gladys Doyle, Paul Finesh, Arthur Hagner, Helena Halushka, Miri Hatjenikolau Nichols, Doreen Hurd, Jenny John, James Constantakos, Jan Laird, Juan Legarda, Eileen Martak, Donna Moffat, Valeria Shatova, Pam Strong, Elizabeth Zustaka Yannicka, Diane Wagner, Nada Zagomba, and John Hartzema. Again, we wish you every success in your future endeavors. Item 7, number 7, Board Chair's announcements. In recognition of National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, today, September 30th, is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The day was officially created when Bill C-5 received royal assent by the Canadian Parliament on June 3rd, 2021. This National Day ensures the opportunities to recognize and remember the legacy of colonialism through the residential school system, which more than 150,000 First Nation, Métis, and Inuit children were forced to attend between the 1870s and 1997. The many recent discoveries of unmarked burial sites this past spring amplify this reality. The creation of a day of remembrance, such as the one we are recognizing, was one of the 94 recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report, released in June 2015. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a federal statutory holiday for all federally regulated employees. Federally regulated employees include federal public servants and bank employees, and those governed by the Canada Labour Code. September 30th has not been declared a statutory holiday in the province of Ontario, therefore schools remained open. To date, the Peel District School Board schools have recognized the Orange Shirt Day movement, which first launched in 2013 in Williams Lake to commemorate the history and the legacy of residential schools and the strength and fortitude of residential school survivors and their descendants. This year, like others, Peel District School Board recognizes Orange Shirt Day on September 30th, 2021. However, the acknowledgement of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, supported by Orange Shirt Day recognitions during this week of Truth and Reconciliation in Peel District schools and classrooms, builds on this momentum. It also builds on the motions approved by the Board of Trustees to secure the acknowledgement of Indigenous heritage in the month of November, at which time Treaties Recognition Week, the first week of November, International Inuit Day on November the 7th, Indigenous Veterans Day on November the 8th, and Louis Riel Day, November the 16th, occur. Further, the Indigenous flag is raised in June, named as Indigenous History Month, and for June 21st, National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is celebrated by Indigenous peoples across Canada. The process of reconciliation between First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities with settlers to this land begins first with talking up the truth of the impact of colonialism on current and future generations of Indigenous peoples. It is an ongoing process that recognizes our treaty obligations, not just with monthly recognitions, but each and every day. Item number 8, there is no report this evening from our student trustees. Item number 9, there are no reports this evening from trustees appointed to external organizations. Leads us to item number 10, which is the Director's Leadership Report. Director Swaroop.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Good evening, trustees, community members, and colleagues. I would like to begin my remarks by acknowledging Truth and Reconciliation Day. As Supervisor Rodriguez noted, today, September 30th, 2021, for the first time, Canada recognized the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation as a new federal statutory holiday. Our schools remained open today so that students and staff could engage in the learning opportunities throughout this week as Truth and Reconciliation Week, including Orange Shirt Day, which the board has recognized for several years. All schools have had the opportunity to register for Reconciliation Week, which is a series of virtual learning events put on by the National Center of Truth and Reconciliation to learn from survivors, elders, knowledge keepers, and community. Many Peel District School Board secondary school classes joined a virtual live stream called Moving Forward Together with Anishinaabe artist Isaac Murdoch that was hosted by our partners at the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board. I now invite you to watch this video, which features our staff sharing their experiences and the significance of Orange Shirt Day.
Wearing orange, to me, is about recognizing the true history of what's happened here in Canada.
It's about resilience. It's about rising up and reclaiming our culture, remembering the children who didn't come home.
When I wear orange, or when I see other people wear orange, to me it means that they're starting to recognize the true history and what really happened to Indigenous people in Canada.
Wearing an orange shirt, and when I see other Canadians wearing orange shirts, for me it means that other people are starting to hear these stories and starting to believe these stories.
My great-grandfather went to Mount Elgin Residential School in Muncie, Ontario. And when I hear stories about what happened in residential schools, and when I hear about graves being uncovered, I think about how easy it would have been for my family to be erased.
It's about a resurgence. It's about strength. It's about standing up.
So when people wear orange shirts, it means that they're thinking about that something wasn't right in our history and we need to fix it now.
It gives me a lot of hope for where we are and where we're going, and that gives me hope for the future.
Seeing everybody wearing orange throughout the Peel District School Board just makes me so proud to know that people understand the history and also understand that we are not history. We are still here.
Thank you to the members of the Peel Indigenous Network of Employees who you saw in this video. Powerful words. We are not history, we are here. And an even more powerful message, learn about the true history and face the truth. Talking about this school year, the school year 2021-2022 at Peel District School Board has opened up to a world of exciting possibilities. It has been my absolute privilege as the Peel District School Board's Director of Education to join you on this transformational journey. We started the new school year welcoming 149,412 students who are enrolled in our system for in-person or online learning. 107,043 are in elementary schools and 42,369 students are in secondary schools. We have carefully planned the reopening of schools, working within government direction and public health recommendations. You will hear details about this from Claudine Scaccato, Superintendent, Student Re-engagement and Pandemic Response during the staff report portion of tonight's meeting. The Peel District School Board's pandemic response team is to be commended for their tireless efforts in keeping staff, students, and families safe. Over the last several months, school staff, administrators, support staff, and senior team have worked tirelessly in their efforts and commitment to ensure our schools and learning spaces, whether online or in person, are back to school ready. A heartfelt thank you to all staff. Our students have been adaptable and are continuing their learning in another atypical school year. And I want to recognize and appreciate all our students, as it has not been easy, and they have shown us what it means to have resilience and passion. And I want to acknowledge parents and caregivers for their patience and understanding in working with us while we adapt and navigate through this changing learning landscape. And I want to recognize the staff at We Welcome the World reception centers. For many families whose children and or youth become Peel District School Board students, the reception center is the first introduction to their educational experience with the Peel District School Board. The activity at the We Welcome the World locations at the start of the school year is typically very busy. Over 1,900 students have been registered, of which 1,528 are secondary and 424 are elementary. We have over 47 families from Afghanistan. The We Welcome the World team are working literally around the clock to ensure our internationally arriving students are connected to classrooms. I'm immensely grateful to have the opportunity to work alongside our dedicated staff in schools and other locations to continue to effect change in our educational institutions and create equitable learning outcomes for all Peel District School Board students. And I want to share with you some of my school visits. Being visible and connecting with staff, students, family, and community is important to me. And I've been visiting schools in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, and meeting with principals, vice principals, teaching staff, support staff, and students. I've been to 16 schools during my first month here. And these visits are giving me an understanding of all our schools and communities we serve. The ministry's directives related to school operations and culture have been grouped in 4 themes: relationships, student learning and well-being, leadership capacity building, and accountability. When I visit schools, I'm able to see our work on the ministry directives in action. I hear the passion in the administrators and staff as they share what they're doing to disrupt systemic racism, especially anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism. They are using an anti-oppression and anti-racist framework for decision-making in their schools. While I'm mindful that we have a long way to go to dismantle inequities, I want to affirm the work that has begun and is having a positive impact on school culture and school climate. I have met with students from the Black Excellence Club in a school. I met the graduation coach in another school. Words matter, and the school shared that they believe in creating inclusive and equitable spaces by using the phrase calling in instead of the phrase calling out. One school I visited has dismantled their library and acquired books that reflect the identity and culture of students. Another school has a culturally responsive book club. And I saw sensory floors in one hallway and a sensory wall in another school to provide visual and tactile stimulation and support the development of fine motor skills for some of our students with special needs. And in one school I was visiting, they post a mental health question each week for students to engage in critical discussions. And in this school picture, you see staff engaged in social emotional learning with kindergarten students in the school grounds. A secondary school welcomed their students by creating a welcome wall at the entrance with the word welcome written in all the languages that are spoken by students in that school. And the care and commitment of staff was evident in this school as they stood by the exit doors and waited patiently to sign out textbooks to students who are learning online. These were some snapshots of my visits. And I would now like to give you an update on 2 ministry directives. The Peel District School Board continues to work with all stakeholders to align the ministry directives to bring synergy and coherence with a clear focus on addressing the disparities and disproportionalities facing Black, Indigenous, racialized, and all marginalized students. The photos you'll see as I speak are just a few examples of how we are moving in the right direction. Directive 9. The deliverable for Directive 9 was to develop and implement an annual equity accountability report card. This report card will serve as a baseline on the equity gap for student outcomes with ongoing monitoring through an iterative cycle. In the staff report section of the agenda, Associate Director Lynn Strangway and Acting Chief Research Officer LaShawn Murray will provide an overview of the annual Equity Accountability Report Card. Next, I would like to speak about Directive 15, which is about developing a learning plan for senior staff. This directive has a steering committee that is comprised of members of the academic and business side of the organization. The senior team learning plan came to the board as a report for review on February 19th this year, and an update is scheduled for the November board meeting. In July, the team engaged in the first of 4-session professional learning series with Dr. Vidya Shah and Mike Saber. The series is designed to support senior team with developing their critical self-awareness and consciousness that is necessary for building cohesion specific to the implementation of the board priorities around the dismantling of systemic racism, specifically anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism. One of the main areas of focus for senior team learning for the upcoming year is the application of anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and decolonizing leadership practice in their everyday work, the explicit demonstration of this work, and subsequent monitoring for impact. The steering committee's work will focus on the depth and application of learning, along with the development of an accountability framework that will support the active monitoring of impact on student outcomes to ensure that disparities and disproportionalities are explicitly addressed. As director, I'm committed to meeting the mandates of the ministry directives and at the same time ensuring that the directives become foundational to Peel District School Board's system transformation. The path to transformation begins with knowing our students, staff, and communities. As I shared with you last month, leadership for me is about building relationships by listening to all voices, understanding divergent perspectives, and then acting to effect real change. It's important for me to recognize and be mindful of who is around the table and always consider who is missing from that conversation. When all voices are represented and heard, we can together create equitable, caring, and inclusive learning environments that will serve as a foundation for improved outcomes for each and every student so that they can reach their highest potential. And this concludes the director's update. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Swarup. Moving on to item number 11, the consent agendas. And this is item 11.1, which is the amendment to the Peel District School Board bylaw. It is a simple amendment to deal with being consistent with our meetings that will be virtual. And so I approve the recommended amendment to bylaw 5.10.1. And 11.2, Peel District School Board Policy 56, Occupational Health and Safety, is a policy that is an annual policy that comes to board. And I approve the report on Policy 56 pertaining to occupational health and safety for this year. Item 12.1, minutes of the board meeting from August 25th, 2021. I approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 25th, 2021. And item 13, 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, 0.4, and 0.5. I'm in receipt of the minutes and the recommendations of the Audit Committee of June 10th, 2021. I'm also in receipt of the minutes and recommendations of the Special Education Advisory Committee of June 15th, 2021. And I'm also in receipt of the Committee of the Whole open session minutes of August 25th, 2021. Moving on to item number 14, 14.1, COVID-19 update number 10, Director Swarup.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez, and through you, I would ask Superintendent Claudine Scaccato to provide the COVID-19 update.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, and thank you, Director Swarup. As a part of our ongoing commitment to students, staff, and community safety, we continually update our enhanced safety measures and our operating procedures based on direction and guidance from Peel Public Health. Often this is based on local Peel context in relation to case counts, combined with new learning as to how exposures and transmissions occur. All of the Peel Public Health recommendations that we operationalize are meant to increase the level of safety for students, staff, and our greater community. I'd first like to discuss with you our reopening operating procedures. As shared by Director Swarup, based on our current COVID-19 conditions, the Ministry of Education announced that all Ontario schools would reopen for students for the 2021-2022 school year with enhanced health and safety protocols. The Peel District School Board learning models are as follows. In elementary school, students from kindergarten to grade 8 will return to in-person learning at school 5 days a week. Secondary students from grades 9 to 12 from September 2021 to January 22 will follow a modified semester model. In the modified semester model, students will take a total of 4 courses over 20 weeks, and they will alternate by taking 2 weeks, 2 courses 1 week and the other 2 courses the next. And of course, the voluntary in-person attendance. All families have the option to opt out of in-person learning and receive full online learning instruction only in our virtual learning environment. Next, I wanted to share that the Peel District School Board is participating in the Ministry's Self-Collection Kit pilot program. The pilot program will distribute take-home self-collection kits to students and staff in selected secondary schools who are vaccinated, asymptomatic, and deemed to be high-risk contacts due to an outbreak at their exposure at their school. This program is entirely voluntary for staff and students, and they have the option to seek testing through their local assessment center or specimen. I'm happy to report that there are 21 Peel schools currently participating in that pilot, which runs through the month of October. Next, we continue our partnership with the Region of Peel and offer school-based clinics for vaccination. This partnership hopes to provide many accessible options for students, parents, school staff, Peel residents, and community members to get vaccinated. In order to ensure students and staff safety, these clinics are being run after school hours and on the weekends. And I shared in my written report a number of schools that have already had vaccination clinics and one's forthcoming throughout the month of October. And finally, I wanted to share with you that in partnership with Peel Public Health, our central COVID team created a comprehensive workflow which provides administrators guidance on how to complete the initial report and management of a case of COVID-19 in the school. The workflow outlines the 4 stages of the process that includes confirming, reporting, managing, and communicating. And the entire process is meant to support administrators to make informed and timely decisions to keep our students, staff, and community safe. I have updated numbers to share with you around the number of students enrolled in elementary, which is now 91,207. Number of students enrolled in elementary in-person learning is 33,535. To date, we have had 117 COVID cases, 11 only being in secondary and 106 in elementary, with 11 staff cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Sakato. Any questions for Superintendent or the Director? Could you, from Trustee Kathy McDonald, could you kindly just repeat those numbers near the end, Superintendent Sakato?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So we've had 117 student cases, 11 in secondary schools and 106 in elementary schools, and we've had 11 staff cases for a total of 128.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Sakato, and thank you, Director Swaroop.
Thank you
for that report. I'm in receipt of the COVID-19 update number 10. 14.2 Ministry Directives, 14.2A, Directive 9, the Annual Equity Accountability Report Card, baseline data on the equity gap in student outcomes. Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask Associate Director Lynn Strangway and Acting Chief Research Officer LaShawn Murray to present the report.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez and Director Swaroop, in accordance with Ministry Directive 9, which states the Peel District School Board shall develop and implement a comprehensive annual equity accountability report card that 1. Reports on clearly defined student-centered outcomes, including eliminating disparities in achievement of students from the board's various communities. 2. Establishes accountability measures and responsibilities for school and senior board leadership using disaggregated data. It is our pleasure to present the first annual equity report card to the board this evening. In doing so, we would like to acknowledge the contributions made by various student and community groups in the development of this report. Our gratitude is also extended to Dr. Carl James for his critical insight and feedback throughout the development of this report. We also wish to thank selected representatives of internal employee resource groups, advisory councils, and community organizations for their review. Sincere thanks to the late Kala Iliamid and Christine Diaz for their significant contributions to this report. This report includes the Peel District School Board's first annual Equity Accountability Report Card. It presents data from the 2018-2019 school year to establish a baseline of disproportionality measures so that improvement can be measured over time. Given the specific focus of the ministry review, the experiences of African, Afro-Caribbean, Black, and Indigenous students are intentionally centered using critical race theory. This first report focuses on anti-Black racism as per the terms of reference in the ministry review and anti-Indigenous racism and the historical data showing that African, Afro-Caribbean, Black, and Indigenous students have experienced the greatest disparities in academic and experiential outcomes within the Peel District School Board. Future reports will focus specifically on other identity groups that also face discrimination within the board, as noted on page 6 of the ministry review, including Islamophobia, suicide rates amongst 2S LGBTQ+ students, anti-Semitism, violence and substance abuse concerns within some South Asian student groups, and low representation of Latin American students in regional learning choice programs. There is a list of future addendums to this first Equity Accountability Report Card located within the report that will address the issues outlined in the ministry review. This first Equity Accountability Report Card presents the baseline data on equity gaps in student outcomes. Future reports are intended to assess and measure the implementation of the directives that specifically address student outcomes. These measures will inform the board's efforts to create deep structural and cultural changes that infuse the core values of equity, inclusion, and human rights into everyday practices, programs, and choices. LaShawn Murray, our lead researcher on the development of this report, will discuss the structure of the report and the different data sets utilized to develop this report in such a way that it did not further perpetuate negative stereotypes about Black, Indigenous, and other historically marginalized groups of students in the Peel District School Board. I'll turn it over to LaShawn.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez and Director Swaroop. Within the Equity Accountability Report Card, quantitative data sources include the 2018 PDSB Student Census, the Student Information System, the Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index, and EQAO results. Where possible, qualitative data and counter narratives derived from consultations with students, communities, and staff were incorporated within the report card. The outcome indicators are organized into 5 main areas: student achievement, programs and pathways, special education, student discipline, and student well-being. Within each area, data are disaggregated by the identity factors of racial background, gender identity, socioeconomic status as measured by SVI, religion, faith, creed, and spirituality, and sexual orientation for students in grades 7 through 12, along with the intersections between these identity factors.
Thank you, LaShawn. So in summary, this report card highlights the consistent disparities faced by African, Afro-Caribbean, and Black students, Indigenous students, and Latin American students across multiple indicators of their schooling experiences. In many instances, student outcomes are affected by the double marginalization of race and gender and/or race and class. This finding highlights the importance of understanding intersectionality as a foundational form of critical analysis. Addressing the disparities outlined in this report necessitates a deeper analysis of the data and how it relates to examining and addressing current policies and practices within the Peel District School Board. This first equity report card informs the continued focus of the board to interrupt systems, structures, and practices that discriminate against and further marginalize Black, Indigenous, and other groups who have historically been marginalized, and reflects the Peel District School Board's commitments in these areas to address anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, racism, and all forms of systemic discrimination.
Thank you, AD Strangway, and thank you, Acting Chief Research Officer Murray, for a thorough report, first report and the baseline being established. We'll just wait to see if there are any questions based on some of the information that you've provided this evening. Let me just start with the first question. Could you give us some idea, knowing that this is the first report and this is a baseline, what is your intention in terms of the next report? When will that sort of come to board, and will it sort of be a movement from this particular piece from the baseline to giving us some more valid data in terms of what's happening this current year?
I'm going to ask through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will ask LaShawn to outline the focus of the next report and the timeline.
Thank you, AD Strangway. So up next, in terms of the equity accountability report cards, is the accountability framework, which will establish our progress indicators and metrics and timelines according to each of the thematic areas. And then we will also proceed with some of the qualitative data that we've gathered directly from students, alongside some of the employee resource groups, and through our community consultations over the spring and summer of this year.
Thank you. And from Trustee Kathy McDonald, how will the progress be tracked?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'll start and then LaShawn can jump in. So in the report, you can see that there are 5 areas outlined, and in each of those areas, it outlines the measures that we will use to track the progress. I don't know, LaShawn, if you want to provide more information on that.
Thank you, AD Strangway. I think at this time, this will be best reflected within the accountability framework that is upcoming.
Great. Thank you, AD Strangway again, and thank you, Director Swaroop, and thank you, Acting Chief Research Officer Murray for that work. I'm in receipt of the Annual Equity Accountability Report Card, and moving on to item 14.3, Summer Learning and Wellbeing Opportunities for Students Update, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will now ask Associate Director Shirley Ann Teal to share the report.
Thank you very much, Director Swaroop. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I am very pleased to be able to present this report as an update to our summer learning and well-being opportunities for students. Throughout the course of the summer months, we were able to provide programs that impacted 5,228 students. Over 3,700 of these students were secondary age students. The programs offered this summer were reflective of multiple pathways. And they covered the spectrum from credit granting to experiential learning, focusing on literacy and numeracy, sports, non-academic pursuits, and supports for mental health. Programs were funded through many different channels. We received funding from the Council of Directors and Code, through SIA funding, partnership and priority funding from the ministry, specific ministry grants, such as ones that allowed us to be able to support the Be Well support line. Through the ASSDP grant, the After School Skills Development Program. We also had budgeted money in our Student Success Learning to 18 budget. York University sponsored one of the programs. So the funds came from a variety of places. We were very proud of the work that our staff did and our students have participated in these summer programs this year, and look forward to expanding and continuing this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, AD Teal. We'll wait to see if there are any questions. From my read of it, certainly the rich offering of summer programs to support Peel students is quite impressive and certainly helpful for all that were able to be involved with them. Thank you to all of you who had made it possible this past summer. Seeing no questions, again, thank you, AD Teal, and thank you, Director Swaroop. I am in receipt of the Summer Learning and Wellbeing Opportunities for Students Update. Moving on to item 14.4, Regional Learning Choices Program, Review of 2020-2021 Data and Directions, Director Swaroop.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, it will be Associate Director Shirley Ann Teal sharing the information.
Thank you, Director Swaroop. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I would like to welcome and introduce Greg Pearson. Greg is a coordinating principal with Student Learning, the author of the report, and he will speak to this report. Welcome, Greg.
Hello and thank you. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, Director Swaroop, and AD Teal, I'd like to add further description and explanation to some of the sections of the report. First and foremost, the past year's RLCP application process was the first time self-identification data was collected and tracked. Therefore, we do not have exact comparable data that aligns perfectly with their 2020-21 application data. The self-identification process that was implemented for last year's application process will continue for this coming school year. Therefore, we will have comparable year-over-year data. During the application process, several changes were implemented to ensure accuracy for the calculations of algorithms and academic scores and establishing the thresholds for eligibility for all students. Previously, student marks were included in this calculation. For last year's application process, only a student's top 5 marks were used in determining their academic standing. Those top 5 courses could be from any subject and did not necessarily only have to be required courses. Elective courses would also be included. When there were not 5 learning skills marks present, the highest learning skill would be used to account for the missing learning skills. There were differences between schools last year and even within teachers and how learning skills were recorded during the changing from in-person to online school and when these changes took place shortly before reporting cycles. Further to the information I've shared, I would also like to highlight a few items from the chart at the top of page 3 of the report entitled Application Data Elementary and Secondary RLCP for September 2021 classes. It would be of importance to also note that of the total applications received for elementary, which was 4,903, only 5.1% were for self-identified students, and of the 8,269, or 6.3% for self-identified students for secondary programs. Clearly, applications to the RLCP are not in line with representation and population for students who identify as African, Afro-Caribbean, Black, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and other Indigenous identities. However, the strategies adapted for last year's rounds of applications did have a positive impact and serve as a starting point for continued work. Welsh PDSB achieved an average of 11.3% representation for self-identified groups in elementary, at 8.3% in average representation for self-identifying students in secondary, when we were averaging participation across all programs. It is worth noting that our work will need to encourage increased interest and awareness in applications for academic RLCP programs. For the coming application period, another change that will be implemented at the secondary level is a process that has been used at the elementary panel already, where there will be a superintendent review of the thresholds to ensure as many barriers are removed as possible for marginalized students. For this coming school year, work is well underway to ensure increased awareness of all RLCP programs and to ensure greater access to these programs for students who identify as African, Afro-Caribbean, Black, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. All grade 8 classes will be showing spotlight highlight videos to increase awareness and interest in RLCP programs for students. A road sign advertising campaign is being explored, along with potential advertising and community media to extend information beyond traditional avenues and channels such as social media. We are also continuing to work with the Indigenous education, anti-racism, anti-oppression, and community partnerships to gather input from community groups and to design similar presentations that were hosted by the We Rise Together Community Advisory Council last year. With our expanded strategies, we'll be examining the continued impact on the removal of barriers for students, and we'll be looking to see increased applications from students who identify as African, Afro-Caribbean, Black, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and other Indigenous identities. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Pearson. As we move ahead with our regional learning choices programs, it is our intention, as Greg has indicated in his report, to continue to monitor the access our students have to these programs and to look at the impact that we're having with the removal of barriers for students. This first report provides us now with baseline data. And as we provide year-over-year reports back to the board, we'll be able to see the comparative data, and that will guide us in our decision-making and our next steps. As we continue to identify and remove barriers to access, we will be looking to the locations of our programs to determine if that is a barrier. We will be partnering with our guidance counselors as we work with families and schools and students to understand the programs and to have everybody have the choice of whether or not they want to apply. So this is just the beginning. We believe it's been a positive beginning with the changes implemented last year. We have a long way to go yet, and we will. Thank you.
Thank you, AD Teal. Thank you, Coordinating Principal Pearson. First question is from Trustee Kathy McDonald. What's the status of the review of the RLC programs to be culturally responsive? And what about the programs themselves?
I will ask Principal Pearson to take the questions, please.
Thank you. Through you, AD Teal, Supervisor Rodriguez. Due to the pandemic last year and COVID-19, the review of our LCP programs did not take part. There is an endeavor and effort to make sure the review does occur in this coming school year.
Thank you, Coordinating Principal Pearson. Question from Trustee Green. How is this information getting to parents within the Black community?
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez, and through you, we are partnering with several schools and ensuring that information is getting into the communities, being very selective about strategic placement of road signs, making sure that we're using cultural media outlets as well to place advertisements in, along with our traditional media outlets as well.
Thank you. Question from Trustee Davies, statement perhaps, and also a question within it. Many of my constituents, Trustee Davies's constituents, join him in concern for the unfair way that the RLP spots are just given to certain students while all others must enter the lottery system. If one were to imagine the PDSB allocating courtesy seats on buses in a similar manner, I'm sure we could all agree that would not be tolerated. Because the question's asking you to speak to the allocation of seats to students that identify as Métis, Inuit, or First Nations, or identify as Black, African, Afro-Caribbean, being given the opportunity to have those seats, and then others having to go through the lottery.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Yes, this was a familiar comment that we received last school year as well from concerned parents and community members. This was the right thing to do in order to do an historical injustice. Decisive and quick actions had to take place. While we did make some improvement in achieving representation that is more appropriate, there is still more work to do in a short time frame. So I would still suggest that our strategy of allowing self-identification students to automatically be placed in the program when they meet the threshold that's established is still a suitable strategy at this point in time.
Given the data points that you've already outlined for us, is it safe to say that the thresholds in terms of the equitable thresholds in terms of the number of students that identify versus those that are on the programs have still not been met?
We are very close, Supervisor Rodriguez. We are looking more at even the percentages for applications that are received. Not even looking at accountability. We are really short on those numbers, as I was suggesting, in overall numbers for the programs. When we look at our academic programs, we're in single percentage points, 5%, 3%, 4% as an example at several of our programs. So we need to increase interest and awareness in the programs to even start getting applications that would be more in line with representation in the population.
Thank you, Coordinating Principal Pearson. Comment again and question from Trustee Dakrub. Appreciate the report and update. Happy to see some programs, but much more needs to be done to ensure equitable access for our Black and Indigenous students. Also agree that much more needs to be done to create awareness and increase applications. Is it possible to look further into creating a program fund for waiving fees for students who need that, perhaps partnering with the foundation to make this possible? Has transportation been identified as a barrier?
AD Teal, would you be able to comment on that regarding transportation and maybe the Peel Learning Foundation?
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, we actually have started conversations with Associate Director Gill around the feasibility of looking at a business case that will assist parents, specifically in transportation. So that is part of our review and part of our forward thinking. The regional learning choices fees that are currently being charged, we are looking at those very carefully this year as well, to determine if they are suitable, if they are needed, what they're needed for, and to make sure we communicate that thoroughly. But we would never disenfranchise any child that could not afford the fee.
Thanks, AD Teal. Question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. Until the locations review, are there any plans to accommodate students who face barriers due to affordability and transportation? You've responded to that. And then an addendum to that is, will programs be relocated?
Our plan is to look at the locations of the programs now to determine if that is a barrier to access. And if it is, I think we would look at a couple of things. Will the program be relocated? That would depend on the take up of the program interest in that area. Might be more of expanding the programs so that we do have the additional locations that our data shows that we will need.
Thank you. Trustee Dakrub, I believe the question has been answered as well. And Trustee Cameron asks, how will students who live in areas where there is no public transportation available, like all Caledon students, access these programs when the board has a policy that disallows board transportation to RLC programs? It is a policy that treats access to the programs differently for some student depending on where they live. Will you be looking at policies in this regard?
I would say yes. When we look at the full picture, we need to look at all aspects. And trustees will recall that using the Caledon example, we looked at that when we were talking about French immersion. We weren't doing this in that secondary, given that there was no public transportation in Caledon area. So we have to look at what's needed specifically and the unique aspects of the different areas.
Thanks, AD Teal. Another question from Trustee McDonald. When last have brochures been updated to reflect diversity in the RLC?
I can speak to that, AD Teal. Thank you, through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. We are actually going through a review of our marketing materials at the moment. Even today, currently, I was speaking with principal of Harold M. Brathwaite Secondary School regarding marketing campaigns, talking to students, getting clearance of media clearance for new students. So we are updating those pamphlets that will be going out to the community as well. We are even reviewing and editing materials that were used in previous years to ensure proper representation is demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you. From Trustee Marchand. Could we also examine the impact when students from the same home are forced to split attendance between two schools when one child enters a specialized program?
Could you repeat that question one more time, Supervisor Rodriguez, please?
Sure. Could we also examine the impact when students from the same home are forced to split attendance between two schools when one child enters a specialized program?
As far as economic feasibility for the families, for transportation, parent time split between two schools, I'm not exactly sure how I could undergo that, but maybe AD Teal could come up with something.
I believe that would be reflected in our flex boundary policy.
Yeah, he's speaking specifically to money and time.
Definitely as part of the review, we could, AD Teal, we could look at that and put a call out for families that are in that situation.
Great. If you could just take that into consideration as you work through, that'd be helpful. Great. Thank you, AD Teal, and thank you, coordinating Principal Pearson, for all of your work on this. You can see by the questions and certainly the deep interest in this work that everyone is certainly looking at this and trying to kind of be supportive of what's happening, but also looking to see that there does get to be some deep review and and some equitable outcomes in terms of access. So thank you again for all of your work on it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm in receipt of the Regional Learning Choices Programs Review of 2020-2021 data and directions. Moving on to item 15.1, notice of motion, re-implementation of anti-Islamophobia strategy. This was a notice of motion that was provided at the last meeting, and as part of the motion, you will note that the trustee's name appears. Generally speaking, trustees' names don't appear on motions, obviously, because the motion's owned by the floor. However, just given the situation that we're currently in terms of how motions come to the floor, with me having to provide the motion and a trustee bringing the motion forward, there was some issues with that. We will try to fix that as we move forward, but I will ask at this point in time Trustee Dakrub, who brought the motion forward, to be able to speak to the motion and then take any questions that we might have.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. I just would like to say that my chat isn't actually populating all of the questions, so I'm missing some of them, so I may just need some help with questions and comments.
I will help.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to say good evening, everyone, and I want to thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez, Director Swarup, and General Counsel Basanta for facilitating the opportunity to bring this motion forward tonight. Islamophobia has been on the rise in Canada and around the globe for decades. We have witnessed shocking acts of hatred take place against members of the Muslim faith in London, Ontario, and in Quebec. And hate crimes have been on the rise, making Muslims one of the most targeted communities right here in Peel as well. Such events have had significant impact on our students and the broader Muslim community's sense of safety and belonging. The region of Peel is home to a diverse community that includes a vibrant Muslim community. We have a responsibility as the largest education institution to raise awareness and build understanding. We have a responsibility to ensure that our schools are welcoming to all of our students, including our Muslim students. We have a responsibility to ensure our schools are welcoming of all of our staff, including our staff of Muslim faith. And we have a responsibility to deliver public education in a culturally sensitive and student-centered manner. The strategy will focus on education, building understanding, centering student voice, and valuing lived experiences. It is meant to include the delivery of mandatory anti-Islamophobia training to all staff, accountability measures, and regular communication with the broader community. Community input has been front and center, and I want to also use this opportunity to thank the community organizations who have been a part of this process thus far. And to continue this engagement, a community tasked with the oversight of the implementation of the strategy that consists of PDSB staff as well as community members will be established as well. I hope that all of my colleagues would view this motion as an opportunity to build greater understanding in our community and to create a more welcoming and more inclusive public education system. And once again, I want to thank Supervisor Rodriguez for your support on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions and address any concerns.
Thanks, Trustee Dakrub. Questions that might be raised? Just got a statement and a question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. I'll gladly support this motion, any motion that is aimed at eliminating hate, discrimination. I also believe that educational institutions such as the PDSB should be leaders in eradicating Islamophobia and all forms of discrimination. The question is, could you please clarify the intent of the motion around oversight of the committee that will be tasked with implementation of the strategy, as opposed to having the committee be an advisory committee?
So I think part of the idea of having the committee do work on oversight is to ensure that we're having greater community engagement and more community input rather than having an advisory committee. So I think, and there's a lot more ownership when it's about oversight of the implementation of the strategy. We want this to be really owned by the community and driven by the community and led by the community with the support of the board. So it's a bit more involved than just an advisory committee.
So primarily the work that's going on is going on within the community, and the board sort of is supportive in terms of the work that needs to happen that affects students in schools. Is that accurate?
Yes.
In terms of the intent, yeah, great. All right. Well, thanks, Trustee Dakrub. There don't seem to be any questions about this anymore, and let me just. So I approve the motion on the implementation of an anti-Islamophobia strategy as outlined in the motion, and I refer the details to staff. Moving on to, thank you. Moving on to item number 16, trustee notices of motion. There is a trustee notice of motion pertaining to busing that is being raised by Trustee Green, and that will be provided to you so that can be discussed at the next meeting. The essence of the notice of motion is about the transportation reassessment and also students that have lost their spot on school buses due to the reassessment during the school year. So that is the notice of motion that will be forthcoming, and you will see that passed on to you, trustees, and we will have a discussion of that particular notice of motion at the October meeting of the board. All righty. That takes us to item number 17, which is adjournment. Seeing no more questions around some of the reports. Thank you to everyone for your work this evening in bringing forward the reports. And I now adjourn the meeting of September 30th, 2021. Have a good evening.
Thank you.